My arm hurt more after this break than it had after Montreal. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't bathe myself. I couldn't get a coat on. Couldn't cut my meat. Janice had to do everything for me. And when she forgot, I would stand there like a hurt puppy until she noticed. I hate to ask for help. The World Series began 5 days later in Oakland. We weren't in awe of the athletics, but we had played them 11 times in spring training and lost 10. That had been spring, of course, when nothing counts. But still, we remembered. We lost two games in Oakland that weren't even close. The scores were 5-0 and 5-1. We came back to Candlestick Park knowing we had a very big mountain to climb. The weather had continued unnaturally warm. Ordinarily, you wear a coat to Candlestick, but now in mid-October, it was t-shirt weather. I was sitting in front of my locker, talking to Bob Nepper when it happened. We felt a low rumble in the floor, like an airplane passing overhead. We stopped talking and looked at each other. That feels like an earthquake, Bob said. It is an earthquake, I said. The room was shaking. Players ran out of the door of the clubhouse toward the parking lot. In seconds, Bob and I joined them. By the time we stopped in the open area just outside the stadium, the shaking had stopped. People all around were talking loudly, laughing and shaking their heads. Soon reporters came asking for reactions. They said that the Bay Bridge was down, that a wall had collapsed in San Francisco. I began to realize that something serious had happened. We had a full house that night. Friends and relations stayed in nearby hotels. Staying in nearby hotels had no electricity, and we invited them over. Listening to the news of our neighbors all around the bay and of all the people who had died, we felt thankful for our lives. Nevertheless, Janice and I went to bed that night wondering what more could happen to us. A week after the earthquake, Janice, Tiffany, Jonathan, and I left for home in Ohio. My arm was still killing me. I had reached such a low point emotionally that I didn't even care about the final games of the World Series, which had been delayed by the earthquake. 2 days later, I drove up to the Cleveland Clinic for a routine check on my arm. I went up alone and did my time in the MRI cylinder. The next day, Janice and I met with the doctor. He wasn't jolly. He spoke very soberly and slowly, sometimes looking down at the ground. Both breaks, he said, seem to be healing well. He mentioned a pitcher who had broken his arm twice, yet came back to play again. But then the doctor stopped and put his head down. I'm not even concerned about that right now. I'm concerned about the lump. We really need to talk about these MRI results. That was when the conversation really grew serious. He had no way to be sure, but he said that the new lump on my arm looked exactly like a desmoid tumor. He thought that the tumor had come back. Did you understand what the doctors were saying? Janice asked when we were in the car together driving home. David, do you realize that they didn't mention your future in baseball even once? I didn't respond right away because I didn't want to think about it. All my life, I'd set my face towards playing baseball, pushing on no matter what the odds might be against me. That was the only way I knew to think. Yeah, I said finally. It's real sobering. David, Janice said. David, what are you going to do? There you go again. I said, trying to joke. Writing me off. David, what would you say to me if I were in your shoes? If I had cancer and wanted to keep on with my career no matter what the risk? What would you say? That was easy. I tell you to quit immediately. But Janice, you can't tell me what to do. I have to make this decision for myself. Janice got mad with me then. She said it made her sick to think of me going out there and taking those risks. Enough is enough, she said. After what we've been through in the last year, why would you do it? Would you risk your arm to throw that ball again? Is baseball that important? I didn't answer. I just knew that I wanted to keep playing. It was an instinct. No matter what, you keep on. That had been my motto. I'd even tacked it up in my locker where I could look at it each day. Never give up. I called up Atlee the next day. I expected him to tell me to keep on, or at least to see how my arm felt in spring training. He was somber when he heard about the tumor, however. I described Janice's question. What would you say if I were in your shoes? If my wife had a tumor, he said, I know exactly what I'd say. I'd tell her to quit. How do you quit, though? How do you leave something you love, something that has been your life? As I thought about the possibility of quitting, as I let the idea take root in my mind, I was surprised to find that it brought me peace. That threw me a little. What would I gain driving myself and my family through another comeback? What could I get from baseball that I hadn't already received? Why not quit? It came down to this. I would miss the game, and I would miss my friends. The week after coming home to Ohio, Janice and I traveled back to California again. Long before we had committed ourselves to several speaking engagements. On Friday, I saw Atlee. I told him that I had made the decision to retire from baseball. He was thoughtful. It's interesting, he said. Bob Nepper called me yesterday, and we talked about you. Bob told me he was praying that you would have peace about retiring from baseball. I couldn't pray that way for you, Atlee said. I don't know what you ought to do. I've just been praying that you would be at peace in whatever God led you to decide. I am, Atlee, I said. It's as though a tremendous pressure has been released. When we got back to his house, Atlee asked Janice if she was happy about the decision. I could see her struggle with her answer. She was happy, yes, happy that I would be home, happy that we could work on the tumor without trying to think about a future in baseball as well. But for all of us, Janice and me, Allie and his wife, Jenny, the full meaning of retirement began to hit. There would be no more baseball together. We'd spent so many hours together. We'd been so close. I'd gone through the batting order with Allie each game, discussing how to pitch to every last guy in the National League. Atlee had been the guy who would call me 15 minutes after he dropped me off, calling me because he had thought of one last thing he had to say. That night, after we'd said goodbye to Atlee and Jenny, after Janice and I had climbed into our hotel bed and pulled the covers over, I lay in the darkness thinking, what am I going to do about Atlee? I said to Janice. My buddy Atlee, what am I going to do?